Here's everything that we're going to need for this project. We're going to be using the Free as a Bird. Again, it's a cling stamp set. And this little set is great because it has quite a few different sayings that you can use for the inside and the outside of the card. And it has pieces where you have some flowers and some leaves, and then this branch with our 4 little birds on it is just beautiful. We're going to be using this leaf, and we're going to use the large flower, and we're going to use the thank you. So everything else that we need some clear embossing powder. And this time I'm going to show you how to use it if you don't have one of those plastic bins. So you need to have a piece of bond paper, and I've just taken it and folded it in half. We're going to use some elegant faceted gems for embellishing. We have our Pick-a-Punch, our Lovely Labels Pick-a-Punch here. We have Melon Mambo ink, and we have our Versamark, our embossing buddy, our little paintbrush, and our heat tool. And then the other items we need are a piece of our thick Whisper White, and this one is 5.5 by 8.5, and I've scored it at 4 1/4 and folded it. I have a piece of Melon Mambo that is 4 by 5 1/4. Then I have a scrap piece of Melon Mambo. I have a little piece of my champagne, and this is 1 inch by 3 1/4 inches. And I have a little piece of my thick Whisper White that is 3/4 by 3. Okay, so we're going to start with our embossing. We're first going to do our flower on this piece of scrap paper. So I'm just going to give it a little bit of a rub with my embossing buddy, and I'm going to place down 1 flower. You can see there that it's, again, doing a tone-on-tone effect. And I don't have to sprinkle that with embossing powder right away, but I'm going to do that just so that I can get it out of the way. So when I'm using just one of my plastic little bottles that it comes in, and I have my piece, I'm just going to put it over top of my folded piece of paper, and I'm going to sprinkle it directly on. I'm going to try as much as possible to put some back into the bottle. I'm going to tap it off, and then I'm going to check to see if I've got most of my little spots. There are a couple I can see down here. It's not going to matter too much for what we're doing, because we're going to be cutting this guy out, but you can try and get a little bit of that off. So now I'm going to do my larger piece, and I'm going to take my embossing buddy, and I'm going to rub that lightly all over it. I'm going to try not to touch it too much with my fingers, because that will remove some of the powder that I just put down. So I've got a good amount there, and now I'm just going to stamp my leaf multiple times. I'm just holding it, and I want to turn my stamp. I want to have it come in from the outside of the paper. I don't want them all going the same way, and I don't want them all also to be just in the middle of the card. I want them all to go a variety of different ways, so it just looks like they're creating a fun background. So just go all the way around. You're going to want to ink every time that you put your stamp down. You're going to want to get more fresh ink on it, and you can see that it's creating the nice background effect. And then once I've stamped it all the way around, I just look at whether I think there's any areas that are missing. So I think this spot right here maybe needs just a tiny little bit, with that coming in, and other than that, maybe one more little guy over here. So just a tiny little bit coming in. Okay, so there's my entire piece. Be careful you're not touching any of the stamped areas. I'm going to move my pad out of the way again, and I'm going to sprinkle my clear over everywhere. And I'm just going to let it roll right off and onto the other ones, and come in with the rest. So you may end up almost finishing off your little jar before you're done. So I want to make sure that I'm going to flick that off as well. So I turn it over, give it a good flick so you can really hear it. And then you're just going to investigate with your little brush again to see if there's any that need to come off. So just a couple little spots there. Not too many, and it's not so much the end of the world when you're using clear embossing powder, because it's not like a silver or gold where it's really going to be noticeable. What it'll do, it'll just make it look a little bit darker. So I'm going to set that aside again, and let me just clean up my embossing powder. So I'm just going to, and it may help even if you had another piece of paper underneath here because I've got a pretty full jar, so that if any gets on there, I can just move it out of the way. But I did not too bad. I'm going to put on my lid. Okay, and then we're done. You can set that aside. Now I'm going to heat up my heat tool again on number 2, because I'm using cardstock. So I'm just going to heat that up. Not going to point it in any one particular area. And I'm going to heat this up. Again, once it melts, as soon as it melts, and you'll see that it goes shiny, move on to another area. Now, on purpose this time I did manage to stop myself, so you can see that perhaps that it's shiny up here, but it's fairly dull down here. So I know that I haven't heated it up too much, so I'm gonna just go in there and heat it a little bit more because it should be shiny as well. See how it turns shiny? So one more little piece here. Okay, and then I'm happy with that. So it's got a good shine everywhere. Now I'm gonna go in with this one. I'm gonna start on one end. And again, as it turns shiny, I'm going to move it. So it's going to have to take just a little bit more patience with this one, but you're looking for that shine before you move on. It is really very cool though to see this in person. You don't want to touch it right away either. So I don't think I mentioned that before, but this is hot plastic. So if I were to touch it as soon as it's done, it's going to be hot and you could burn yourself. So just give it a couple seconds and it will cool off enough that you could turn it, or you could touch it rather. Okay, so and as your heat tool gets a little bit warmer, your melting will go a little bit quicker too. This one doesn't get so hot, not like a paint stripping tool, that it's going to burn my paper if I'm moving it all the time as soon as it's melted. If I were to hold this too long in one place, it is going to melt that right into the paper. Okay, so another just a quick check to see if I got everywhere. Looks just a little bit dull over there and maybe over here. So you do want to you'll get used to doing that because you really do want it to be nice and shiny. There we go. Way up here. Okay, so we are done. Now we've created a very pretty background with lots of nice shine to it. So now what we need to do is just cut out our little flower. So I'm just going to fussy cut around my flower, leaving a little bit of a border. And I always like to do that because I've spent a little bit of time embossing it, so it's got that really nice shine. I don't want to lose that shine and cut it all off. So I always, no matter, even if I'm not embossing, I typically always have a little bit of a border. And I think there's different thoughts on that. Some people don't like to leave a border. I'm a border person. So that's, if you see any of my stuff, you're going to see a border. So you just need one flower. And now we're going to do the rest of the card. So I'm just going to pull in the thank you and my Melon Mambo stamp pad, and I'm going to try and get this as straight as possible. And I want my words to be a little bit further over to the right hand side. I'm going to try and get these straight on here and sort of in the middle. Not too bad. And then I'm going to take this and put it into my take your pick. And I'm going to use the scalloped end. So the way to use this is, I know that I'm not going to see my writing anywhere because I have a good amount of space there, but it goes in all the way to the end, and I have to use this upside down. So I'm not, whoops, have to open it first. You have to get it in there right up against this edge, this metal piece here, and then I look and see whether I'm pretty centered, and I'm not. I have a little bit more paper over here than I do over here, so I just need to scooch it a little bit to my right to center it up just a little bit more. And that one's not bad. So now I'm making sure I'm holding it against this edge, and I'm going to punch. Okay, so I've got that edge. And now I'm going to do the same thing with my piece of foil. I'm going to put that in, and this one's a little bit wider. So this one here is 1 inch. And I again want to make sure that that is pretty centered in there. Okay, it's not quite centered, almost. And then I'm going to punch. So then I have a perfectly matted little banner. Okay, so I'm going to put this on top of my card. Just going to use my stamp and seal to do that. And it doesn't really matter which way you goes, but if there's a certain area that you like better than another, I think I like it this way, I'm going to put it down and it's going to be centered on your card. You're going to glue your thank you right on top of your champagne foil. Oops, I went a little bit too far, so I'm just going to rub off that glue. And for here, I'm going to have a little bit of border all the way around it. So I gave myself just about a 1/8 inch border all the way around. So I'm going to lay that down on top, get off that little bit of glue. And that's crooked, so I'm going to lift that up and put it down again. That's a little bit better. Then I'm just going to glue that down right on top. Now I could use my stamp and seal. I think it would be sticky enough, but I'm going to pull in a little bit of my mono liquid glue and I'm going to put that down because I know that these are little pieces of plastic, so they need to stick really, really well. So I'm going to put that down so that it extends just to the edge of the melon mambo. Place that down. You might need to hold it in place just for a moment. And then while you're doing that, you can just grab yourself a dimensional, and our flower is going to go on with one dimensional, and it's going to go to the left of the thank you. And then the last thing I'm going to do is go in again with my take your pick tool, and I'm going to grab my elegant faceted gems, and you can decide which one you like the best. And what I usually do is try and leave this down at the bottom. I leave ones at the bottom, although I didn't here, and I just place that over top and see which I like best. And I think even though that sort of picks up the champagne, the clear might be nice, but I really do think the white is probably the best in this case. So I'm going to take it from the top, lift it up with my pointy take your pick tool, and just deposit it right on the center of the card. So there's your card using clear embossing powder, and it just really adds depth and the darkness to the background, which I think is great. And I want to show you a stepped up version of this card too. So the stepped up version looks like this. So I've done a few more things, a little bit more fussy cutting. I have stamped onto the champagne paper here. So again with our clear, so really all you see is the outline. I've stamped onto black, and then I've pulled in a little bit of black embossing powder and also stamped onto white. And on this black one, hopefully you can see here, this is just clear embossing powder with my Versamark again, just onto black. So I've created and put a little bit of ribbon here, built it up a little bit so that I have some dimensional pieces. But other than that, it's really the same card, just stepped up, a little bit more fussy cutting.